surveys of what's the biggest problem that you're seeing in people's homes? What's the number one issue that they report to?
Yeah, so number one issue really kind of reversing back to that as well, with the kind of chemical overloading as well. It's damp is a big issue. And I think condensation, or basically moisture, I think, damp is one of them. So, anywhere from poor ventilation in your home, misguided information as well. A lot of people I see is, we don't have an extractor fan in the bathroom because we have a window. Well, opening a window actually accelerates condensation and actually helps with building and growing a perfect combination for black spot mold if you open a window at the wrong time, because it reduces the temperature of the tiles and the surface, and all of that kind of steam and that moisture in the air is not able to escape through the opening, and therefore it condensates and people leave it, and then or they open the door and that's why you randomly get damp staining in your hallways and stuff like that, and then mold growth in really random places in your home. So that's one of the big things that I typically see. But then kind of going on to cleaning products for that, a lot of people, it's expensive cleaning products. There's the marketing all there for like black spot mold, super killers, and it's, or bleach and things, and it's £3 plus for a bottle in any store. And yes, it can essentially clean and kill off mold, but what they don't tell you is the residual of that, the chemical kind of off-gassing over time, actually could be worse for your health than the mold itself. So the actual mycotoxins that you've got rid of. So, white vinegar is the best cure it's the best preventative measure before you identify the source of where black spot mold is coming from. And it's a fraction of the price. Yes, it smells great, but it's healthier, much healthier. So yeah, mold growth and understanding that in the home. And then if you go into a property and you've got too much, bleach, for example, if people are over clean, they can kill off all the bacteria, all the viruses, when actually then that has the adverse effect that you want it to, because overly clean homes means your immune system isn't able to fight off the bacteria or viruses and natural kind of things. And then you end up going outside and not being able to fight them off. So yeah, it's having that healthy balance in between. But then you're saying about, we've got the pollutants and things that are then like formaldehyde, benzene, the particulate matter, all that kind of stuff that ends up, combining with dust. Now, dust is actually think of it as a protective shield to pollutants. So it can actually, they can cling on, the chemicals, pollutants can cling on to dust, and they can then protect them from like photon rays. So sunlight, for example, weather conditions that normally would kill off this, all of these pollutants can actually be protected for longer and sustained amount of time if your home is dusty. It's, quite interesting fact. So yeah, that's kind of what I see building up. And this new home smell that people tend to love is actually one of the biggest signs for poor internal air quality. You measure that in, it would be a medium to high load of high risk. The primary people that tend to go into new homes because of the financial, way that the whole country's going is new families trying to go on to the property ladder, and therefore they have babies, and that's why there's kind of 1.5 or 2.5 bedroom houses, and then immediately that next generation is going into the new home smell, and yeah, then they end up getting asthmas and things like that, and yeah, there's a whole load of ailments that then come off the back.
Grim stuff. So we can see how important it is basically to make sure that the materials and everything that you're using in your home is as least toxic as possible. So, Edward, are there any ways that we can be more sure about these products and brands that are going into our homes? Is there any certification systems or labels that will help us as designers and consumers choose better products?
Yes, there are. And I think that you start with just using your natural curiosity, which is why I come back to the job of a surveyor of any product being to inform you with relevant information, not just marketing fluff. Well, we still have the marketing fluff, but we're good at marketing fluff. But it's very important. I think particularly declaration of ingredients. You don't understand why that's not mandatory. for paint. But if there are two things that should inform you whether a tin of paint is useful. One is the ingredients, so you can decide whether they're appropriate. The other is some measure of its likely performance. And to go to what Jason is saying, the tubers were probably one of the most hazardous materials indicted or grown of that mold is the very paint layer itself. And so notwithstanding what Jason says, most buildings already exist, old buildings. And on the whole, they've been made with traditional materials that are able to manage the passage of water vapor in the air. This happens at microscopic level, way beyond just the steam you see after the shower. And it's as important on the outside of the building as the inside of the building. But if you're plaster on the outside of your wall, say, and the wall itself, and the plaster on the inside of the building, and the coating on top of that plaster has some permeability, microscopic level, then you don't have to get quite so much influence on whether water droplets will condense. So we see them condensing on glass and tiles very obviously, but a very awful lot of paint is doing exactly the same thing. It's making what we call the dew point. Once you have those water droplets, they in themselves perhaps might not be harmful, but of course what they're yummy for is mold spores that are in the air all of the time. So I'm hoping that with the new law, the Awaab's law, that the spotlight will be put on landlords, to begin with social landlords, but then all landlords, and we will find actually that they're not all evil landlords, but they are significantly underinformed about how buildings work, and that we'll then realize that there are some very quick fixes. So the SD value is the measure of breathability. That's the other thing that should be on the tin of paint, as far as I'm concerned. And that will give the builder, the developer, the architect a straightforward measure of whether this coating is going to inhibit the passage of water vapor in the air. Beyond that, the idea of certifications is the guiding. You know, we know from what organic food, it has to have a certification. Therefore, we're kind of used to that being a benchmark. But other certifications, on the whole, have to be meetable by too many people who are already doing the wrong thing. So it's quite hard to find a certification that's good enough, but has enough popular awareness, really. So I think they're good to look out for. I think that asking people what certificates to look for is important. But we're a member of something called the Association for Sustainable Building Products. They're out there. Their titles are usually not that snappy. They're usually fairly clearly marking what they're about. So they are out there. But we've got into this culture where we need this flag or signal, whereas we could just use our minds if we were given the information. I see what's in that. I don't like the idea it's foam. I see what's in that. Oh, I see that's got natural color filling or whatever. I'm more comfortable with that. And just allow us to treat the consumer as a grown-up. But it works both ways. You know, we have to be grown up. And if there isn't a symbol that you recognize, just ask normal questions.